In today's video, I wanted to begin my journey through House Telvanni's questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Morrowind allows the player to become a member of one of the three major houses on Vvardenfell. These houses, Redoran, Hlaalu, and Telvanni, have their own unique quirks, personalities, and storylines. To put it in layman's terms, Redoran are the warriors, Hlaalu are the diplomats, and Telvanni are the wizards. Of course, it's much more complex than that. Each faction has its own inner workings with its politics and government. Plus, each house has a rocky relationship with all of the others. On top of that, some of the houses have strained relations with some of Vvardenfell's factions. For example, Telvanni and the Mages Guild, two factions that in theory have a lot of shared interests, aren't exactly on the best of terms. It's a really exciting and fascinating world. The developers put a lot of love and attention into the finer details of these stories, and I'm really looking forward to experiencing this one for the first time. A little while ago, I put out a poll on which of the three houses I should explore first. To my surprise, House Redoran won. I thought for sure Telvanni would have pulled ahead, and my dealer's choice would have been Hlaalu. Well, unsurprisingly, Redoran's story was fantastic. It kept me on the edge of my seat. I was actively looking forward to the next quest, and each mission felt rewarding. I'm very excited to see what Telvanni has to offer, and having met both some of the big and small players in the faction, I know it will not disappoint. So, as per usual, I'm going to play through the questline, detail my experiences, discuss the dialogue, and explore some lore and observations. Excess information and facts are either supplied by the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages or the in-game texts. Joining Morrowind's factions is a relatively easy feat. For most, it's as simple as walking on up to a representative of said guild and asking to become a member. House Telvanni is no different. Really, the only possibly confusing part, if you can call it that, is where to sign up and who to talk to. The Telvanni have a large presence on the eastern side of Vvardenfell. Looking at villages like Telvas, Telmora, and Telbrenora would be a good start. The interesting part about the Telvanni is their perception on outsiders. House Redoran are a proud people. They stick to traditions and aren't very open with outlanders due to ongoing conflicts. On the other hand, House Hlaalu are all about relations and diplomacy. Due to their connections with the Empire, they tend to be more open and welcoming. Obviously though, this does come with its own level of fakeness and self-centeredness. Then you have House Telvanni. They are quite interesting. They don't really like to mingle with outsiders. It's not because they don't like them per se, but more so because they just don't care. They're too caught up in their own work and research to really show any interest in the outside world. That makes them more recluse and mysterious, which to me makes them even more interesting. After a little bit of searching, you learn that the only way you can join the house is by speaking with the mouths of Sadrith Mora. That's certainly an interesting title for these wizards. You'd almost feel like you're communicating with the Dark Lord of Middle-earth. The mouths communicate the will and thoughts for each leader of the Telvanni. There are 4 counselors and 1 archmagister. Considering the archmagister is technically a higher rank than the counselors, you'd wonder if his mouth feels a sense of superiority over all the others. In any case, the will of the leaders just involves telling the player what to do for the time being. Entering the Telvanni council house in Sadrith Mora, the mouths can be found at the center of the tower. Talking to any one of them and asking about the house, they tell me that the Telvanni value talent, knowledge, and initiative. While it does feel like they're blowing smoke up their own rears, it is almost kind of true. Any schmo can join, but not any schmo can get recognition. After that, they ask me if I want to join the faction. Inquiring about it, they give me the age-old Great House warning. You won't be able to join any of the other houses, Hlaalu or Redoran, if you commit to Telvanni. Quickly hearing out their rules, I was surprised with what I had heard. With most factions, the rules are almost always the same. Take assignments, rise through the ranks, and don't harm or steal from your housemates. However, the Telvanni went on to say that they trust my judgment. If I decide to steal from the clan and end up successful, then I deserve to keep whatever it is that I had taken. If I decide to attack and kill a housemate, I'm simply deemed in the right if I'm the one who survived the ordeal. They then go on to say that the Telvanni are the only faction that does things this way and ask again if I'm interested in enlisting. Giving the mouths the old 2 thumbs up, I get welcomed into the faction as a hireling. My first order of business is to approach any of the mouths and ask for chores and advancements. From here, I have my whole journey ahead of me as the newest member of House Telvanni. To begin my grand quest, I could speak with any of the 5 mouths here in Sadrith Mora. Each one has a couple of missions for me to embark on. As you can probably guess though, these are fairly beginner-esque quests. Some have sustenance and story to them, while others are a means of introducing the player to magic and the inner workings of the guild. Approaching Raven Omain, the mouth representing Mistress Dratha of Tel Mora, she asks me if I'd like to begin my chores. Chores is certainly a strange way to word these tasks. Feels like I meant to put my clothes away, and no, this is definitely not foreshadowing an upcoming quest. Most other factions call them duties and assignments, but I guess Telvanni really does do almost everything differently. Her first chore is honestly child's play. It's one that we've already come across with the other great houses and even some of the lesser factions. Dainali Dren, Mistress Dratha's alchemist, needs 5 portions of Muck. Doesn't matter how I get them, doesn't matter where they come from. All Dren needs is 5 samples. Once I've secured those, I'm to bring them back to Omain. In a lot of ways, these super simple fetch quests are meant to introduce the player to certain skills. In this case, it would be alchemy. Of course, every faction needs to have these type of quests, as the game should assume that almost everyone doing this faction is brand new to the game. However, it obviously isn't the most interesting task to do. I guess the nice part is that it's over and done with pretty quickly. Exiting the tower and veering north into Azura's coast, you can actually find quite a few muck sponges. It takes no time at all to gather 5 samples, and once all of them have been procured, it's back to Raven for the wrap-up. The mouth rewards me with 100 drakes, which I'd say is more than enough for the type of task that I had done. By the end of her dialogue, Raven ends up complaining about the lack of knowledge for cure disease spells. In a rather demeaning way, she then asks if I know the spell, and believe it or not, I don't think I do. So telling her no, she teaches it to me, and that acts as a bonus reward for this quest, as well as a lesson in restoration magic. Not too bad. With that, thus ends the quest, Muck. Returning to Omain, I asked her about my next set of chores. Dishes, laundry, tidying, I was ready for just about anything. To my delight, her next quest involved a little more skill. Mistress Dratha wants a ring called Black Jinx. Raven doesn't offer any surplus information on it though, other than the fact that it's likely here in town. Once I've acquired it, I'm to return to the mouth and hand it over. This mission involves the slightest bit of detective work, which is certainly better than none at all. Asking around my fellow Telvanni, most don't know where to find the ring, but some do have leads. Marasso Saren tells me that the ring belongs to someone in the Morag Tong, Vardenfell's government-sanctioned assassin clan. They apparently have a guild hall here in Sadrith Mora, and Marasso suggests that I take my search there. Admittedly, it took me a little bit to find the hall. Saren said that it was on the northeastern side of town. I think I was confused with regard to the council hall's location, as it was about as north as any of these buildings could get. But I suppose technically northeast is relative to Sadrith Mora's borders. So after lowering my search area a bit, I finally landed at the Morag Tong's base. The first NPC I spoke with was a Dunmer named Dunsalapal Danahi. When I asked about the Black Jinx, he didn't really cough up any answers, even while charmed. However, his unwillingness to share information was all I needed to know that the ring was around here somewhere. So, sticking my nose in the rest of their lair, I managed to find a back room that held another NPC named Alvin Salis. Speaking with Alvin, he ended up giving away that he was the ring bearer. He pretty much said, "Maybe I do, what are you gonna do about it?" Charming him and trying again, this time Salis had a different response. He mocked Mistress Dratha for not coming to get the ring. Honestly, that's a fair assessment. He calls her a coward, which again, true. Then he follows it up by saying that the only way I'll get the ring is by fighting him. With little to no other choice, I challenged Alvin to a duel and took on the thrall. Salis is level 7 and fights using his fists. Lower level players might have some difficulty taking him on, while higher level ones should find it no problem at all. The Black Jinx is an enchanted ring that absorbs luck for 10 to 15 points for 120 seconds, as well as burdens for 25 to 100 points for another 2 minutes. It's a pretty decent ring, but what a counselor of House Telvanni wants with it is beyond me. Maybe there are some lore implications, maybe it's for research, or maybe it's just for the heck of it. After all, it's hard to understand the Telvanni's true motives. Returning to Raven, I handed her the ring. She says that because the ring is meant to distill fear in others, which is actually not the case, she'll offer to teach me a spell that will make others fear me. Omain shows me how to cast demoralizing spells, which is more or less the reward for this quest. Furthermore, asking for more chores, Raven says that that's it for her. She has no other tasks for me to do and suggests that I speak with the other mouths or Mistress Dratha directly. Although one of Dratha's lovely quirks is that she doesn't like male characters, so that should make our interaction very interesting. With that, thus ends the quest, Black Jinx. From here, I can turn my attention to the other mouths of the council hall, or I can seek out Mistress Dratha and see what kind of shenanigans we can get up to. However, believing her quest to be a little more impactful for later in the story, I decided to speak with Aurora Uvalis, the mouth for Master Naloth of Telnaga. Inquiring about chores, she asks me to run an errand for her. Aurora needs 5 samples of Sload Soap. Can't say I've heard of that one before. It's pretty much the same setup as the first quest, Muck. Find and secure the samples by whatever means necessary, then bring them to the mouth, no questions asked. However, as a little extra spice, Uvalis gives me a sum of 500 gold for the shopping and says that I can keep the change. Sounds great to me, but believe me, I'll be needing that change for what's to come. Asking around my fellow Telvanni, I was directed to someone named Anna Seloth. She has her own place by the tavern, Farah's Hole in the Wall, and is actually the town's alchemist. Paying her a visit, she'll have more than a few samples available for purchase. If you really want to make the most out of this quest, make sure you either charm her or have a decent barter skill. The more she likes you, the cheaper she's willing to sell you the soap. Obviously, this doesn't matter much for characters that have hundreds of thousands of gold, but for the greenies, it might just net you a little more pocket change. Once I had the Sload Soap, super curious on how that gets extracted, I was free to return to Aurora. Handing her the samples, she does offer a little bit of flavor lore on Master Naloth. He's old and has trouble moving around. The soap mixed with another ingredient makes for the perfect ointment for his joints. The more you know. The reward for this one is the money that you get to keep. But remember, you just might be needing it for the next one. With that, thus ends the quest, Sload Soap. Returning to Uvalis for her next chore, it continues to mirror Raven's set of quests. The mouth would like for me to find and procure a magical staff. Master Naloth has set his sights on the Staff of the Silver Dawn. Intel suggests that a member of the Mages Guild at the nearby Wolverine Hall has possession of it. I'm to head over there, find out who has it, and take it off their hands. Aurora doesn't really say by whatever means necessary, but it certainly feels implied. As I mentioned earlier, the relationship between the Mages Guild and the Telvanni is complex. Honestly, I don't think the Telvanni really mind the Mages Guild that much, but for some reason, the higher-ups of the guild seem caught up in the Telvanni's affairs. I guess that's just the classic empirical way though. I suppose they are often researching the same fields: old ruins, Dwemer and Daedric, magical breakthroughs, ancient texts, etc. The Telvanni are just too caught up in their studies to really care about sharing their work. Plus, given that their sovereignty is being threatened, I don't think you can blame them for playing their cards close to their chest. Entering the Imperial Fort and ascending to the Mages Guild Hall, the first NPC I spoke with, Tusumaril, said that Ariel had the staff. Ariel Fiendsil, an apprentice with the faction, doesn't deny or shy away from owning the piece. She even says that she doesn't use it very often and is willing to get rid of it. However, it will come at a fee of 300 drakes. Do you see what I was saying before? How it's best to keep some of the previous quest's earnings on you? Well, buying the staff of her is a worthy trade, as it opens up the rest of the questline and it allows you to receive the next reward. Now, if you really wanted to spoil your relations with the Mages Guild, you could always back out of the conversation and cast Frenzy on Ariel. Because she aggroed on first, it doesn't count as murder or assault, and she shouldn't be too difficult to dispose of. If you really wanted to keep your 300 drakes, this would be the way of doing it. Otherwise, bite your tongue, purchase the silver staff, and return to Aurora. As for the staff itself, it has the enchantments of Fortify Blunt for 10 points for 5 seconds, and Blind for 5 to 75% for another 5 seconds. Again, your guess is as good as any as to why Naloth would want this. Research, power display, a stiff finger to the Mages Guild, take your pick. Handing it over to Uvalis, she rewards me with Master Naloth's old glass jink blade that's no longer being used. Furthermore, she teaches me a blind spell which will help me for my future battles. As for chores, Aurora says that that's it for her, and she offers me the same spiel. I can turn my attention to another mouth, or speak with Master Naloth directly. With that, thus ends the quest, Staff of the Silver Dawn. For the same reasons that I had shared before, I decided to leave the counselors for a later date and focused on wrapping up with the mouths. Having a majority of the quest givers in one confined space was a convenience I had never gotten to experience before. The next rep I spoke with was Felisa Ulusen, the mouth for Mistress Thorana of Telvanni. Her set of chores were a little different from the previous two representatives. At the very least, there was no sample gathering to start with. Instead, I was sent right over to the big boss, Mistress Thorana herself. Felisa says that the counselor has requested some new clothes. The mouth offers to pay me 1,000 drakes to be the delivery boy. Sounds like easy money, right? Ulusen hands me Thorana's new skirt and gives me a word of warning. The counselor can be, quote, eccentric at times. Because of this, the mouth also hands me 2 scrolls of Omsivi intervention. You know, the spell that's used to teleport to safety in a pinch. Certainly very inspiring. She instructs me to use them right away if, for whatever reason, the mistress becomes too difficult. Well, isn't that just peachy? Getting to Telvanni from Sadrath Mora is fairly simple. Behind the council hall tower, there's the town docks. Speaking with the shipwright, Galzarethi, he can take me there for a relatively small fee. Of course, depending on your level, these fares might not be the easiest to handle, but fast travel is of course the most convenient way of getting around Vvardenfell. As I've learned in my travels, the Telvanni counselors usually reside in the uppermost part of their respective tower. By teleporting or leaping to an exterior vantage point, you can usually fast track the whole exploration process of finding the leader. Speaking of which, locating Mistress Thorana, this is where the quest becomes quite amusing. Chatting with her, she immediately notices the skirt in my inventory. Telling her that the article is for her, she lets out her paranoia. Worried that the skirt is cursed, she asks me to try it on first. A little zany and unnecessary, but not harmful, right? Equipping the skirt, showing her it's, well, not cursed, I then went to resume our conversation. However, Felisa's warning finally came to pass. Upon seeing me in her clothes, Thorana became enraged at my audacity to wear her clothes. Yeah, keep in mind, this is a leader of the noble house Telvanni. From here, Thorana aggroes onto my character, and wasting no time, I got out of there via my mark and recall spells. For the time being, Thorana shouldn't be an issue. So, speaking with Felisa, she ends up only coughing up 500 septims, even though I was promised 1,000. Honestly a shame. However, she does offer to teach me the mark and recall spells, and if I didn't already know them, I'd more than certainly take her up on that offer. Now, reverting back to Telvanni, there is an alternative outcome to this quest. I kind of feel bad for doing it, but sometimes it's a dog-eat-dog world, or in this case, a Breton-eat-Khajiit world. Thorana once again tells me to put on her skirt in order to make sure that there's no chili powder in it. Now, instead of actually trying it on, I can turn to her Khajiit slave, Razar, and make him do it. By bringing up the new clothes and telling him to wear the skirt, the exact same set of events occur, only this time it's Razar on the other end. The mistress goes ballistic and evokes her wrath on him. There's nowhere for the slave to run to, and before long, he ends up succumbing to her very powerful magic. Taking the skirt back from his corpse, I then tried to give it to the counselor, as that was the point of this whole thing. Plus, that whole display should have been proof that the skirt wasn't cursed. However, Thorana continues to show her insanity and says that she wants a new Khajiit fur skirt. She then tells me to convey to Felisa that she already has one, implying that she doesn't need one anymore then. I'm not really sure what to make of this conversation, but regardless, my job here is done. Returning to Ulusen once more, the exact same dialogue ensues. She shortchanges me and offers to teach me mark and recall. It seems as though Mistress Thorana isn't the only one around here who has some memory problems. I guess though, if I were to sell the 2 Omsivi scrolls, they would make up for some of the missing payout. With that, thus ends the quest, New Clothes. Returning to Felisa Ulusen, she tells me about my next chore, and again, it's quite different from the status quo. Instead of fetching some magical item, Mistress Thorana wants an end to a slave rebellion. In the Abebel egg mine, a holding owned by Thorana, the slaves have begun to revolt against the Telvanni. My job is to head over to the mine and put an end to their uprising. This way, the fire can't spread and the mistress's other holdings don't get the same ideas. The Abebel egg mine is located north of Telvanni. The specific instructions for locating it are travel north along the peninsula, cross over to the island northwest, and search in the northernmost corner of the island. Admittedly, I had to read that over a few times as there were a fair few norths tossed in there. However, setting my sights on a specific spot of the map, I was able to locate it relatively quickly. Really, half the fun of Morrowind is finding an unmarked landmark through dead reckoning and choppy directions. The satisfactory in doing so is unmatched. As for the Abebel egg mine, it's pretty much what you'd expect. Quama workers, eggs, foragers, and queens. Only, instead of miners or pluckers, gatherers, you have slaves. Speaking with the first one I came across, Sinrai, I asked her about their rebellion. She simply replied by telling me to speak with their leader, Elderscrolls. The Patrick Star wannabe was a little further back in the mine. However, locating him was no problem at all. For now, the rebellion was low on fuel, but depending on how this next part is navigated, I might have a forest fire on my hands. When asked about the revolts, Elderscrolls said that the slaves are rebelling, and that if I have to kill them, then I should just go ahead with it. From here, I have three options. The first is to order them back to work. This is honestly as good as the next prompt, outright killing them. The ringleader says that they'd rather die than continue their labor. What ensues is all 6 slaves coming after the Neverine. However, none of them have any weapons, armor, or spells. They all fight with their fists and can be disposed of rather easily. Lower leveled players might have some difficulty, but using the narrow pathways to your advantage would work best for taking them on one at a time. Once all of the slaves are dead and the rebellion has been quelled, I returned to Velisa and reported my success. I was curious if their deaths would have resulted in some kind of penalty, as I was unsure how Telvanni would have taken the news. However, this method seemed fine, and as a reward, I was gifted with 2 rings. The first was the Ring of Toxic Cloud. It poisons my target for 2 to 60 points for 10 seconds for up to 20 feet. Then there's the Ring of Firestorm. It deals 1 to 50 points of fire damage for 10 seconds for up to 20 feet as well. This reward is actually unique to this outcome, so if you like these rings, then it's best to stick with the murder route. Reverting back, as I mentioned before, declaring to outright kill them has the exact same ending. Really, the different outcome occurs when I choose to listen to their grievances. Elderscrolls says that the Rana is mad. Wonder how he got to that conclusion. She keeps on asking for more and more eggs, even though the slaves have harvested them all. The last time he delivered the Quama eggs to her, he noticed that she was using them as decoration. Instead of eating these delicacies, the mistress lets them rot and places them around her tower. That was the last straw for Elderscrolls. From here, the same 3 prompts pop up. I can either keep listening, order the slaves back to work, or kill them. Of course, nothing changes with the latter 2, so I just continue to listen to his woes. The Argonian ends up picking up on this though, and because of that, he asks for a favor. Elderscrolls wants me to free him as well as the others. He thinks there might be a key somewhere around here, but knows for sure that there's one back in Telvanni. Going with the flow and curious to see where it leads, I agreed to help them. The ringleader was a little skeptical about my good nature, but given that he was all out of options, there was nothing more for him to go off of. According to the UESP, there are 3 keys for their slave bracers. The first is with Mistress Thorana, so good luck with getting that one. The second one is apparently in the lower level of Telvanni's tower, on a table by some Quama eggs. The third though is the most convenient one. It's in the Quama Queen's lair, and really, you only have to fight your way through one Quama warrior. Right by the Queen herself, there's a crate that holds the Abebel slave key. Taking it and unlocking Elderscrolls' bracers, he tells me that he'll do the same for the others, and once done, they're all going to escape to Blackmarsh. Returning to Velisa, this time the conversation and reward are different. She says that she's going to have to hire someone who can track them all down, and on that subject, she offers to teach me a spell that could, quote, command slaves. Really, it's just a command humanoid spell, but you never know when it might come in handy during battle. Take your pick on which reward you'd like, as both offer different buffs. As for further chores from Ulyssin, she says that that's it for her. It's either on to Mistress Thorana for a quest, which she doesn't recommend, or the remaining 2 mouths. With that, thus ends the quest, Slave Rebellion. Getting closer to finishing off the quests with the mouths, the next representative I turned to was Malam Ryan, the speaker for Archmagister Gothrin of Tel Arin. First things first though, I had to stack up my advancements. I went from hireling to retainer to oathman to lawman. The next rank, believe it or not, was mouth, meaning I'd be on par with these 5 NPCs. Just needed a little more experience under my belt. As for Ryan's first chore, it too shied away from the previously established status quo. Gothren wanted me to find someone named Baladas Demnevanni and ask him 3 questions. That was it. What's more, apparently Baladas's answers didn't even matter. It got me thinking, what's the point of this quest then? I guess there's more going on here than meets the eye, and maybe this is more so a stress test than anything. As for the questions, they all had to do with the Dwemer. They were about their artifacts, language, and disappearance. Demnevanni resides in a Velothi tower called Arvstrellen in the town of Nisus. Fun fact, this was one of the few times in Morrowind where I finally heard an NPC say the name of a place. This whole time, I've called it Nissus, and now I'm finding out that it's actually Nisus. If only there was more dialogue like this in the game, then people like me wouldn't struggle so much with pronunciations. Either way, entering Arvstrellen, the tower is mostly safe, barring the odd rat. The further I went in, the more activity I started to see, like Daedra and locked doors, but for the most part, these spawns were docile. The very top of Arvstrellen was where I found Baladas. Speaking with Demnevanni, I can come out of the gate and bring up those 3 questions. Baladas is certainly one of the more patient members of House Telvanni, as he plays along with my little game. However, his disposition is what largely determines the types of answers I'll get back. On my first go-around, with a disposition of 68, every single question was met with a standoffish answer. The Dwemer refused to discuss their research with the incompetent, and Demnevanni feels the same way. If I want information on artifacts, I should go to a ruin and find some for myself. He doesn't know the language of the Dwemer, and that's that. Again, the responses don't matter for Malum, as clearly there are ulterior motives at play. If I really wanted to, I could easily recall to Sadrith Mora and turn in the quest. However, yearning for some better answers, I reverted my save and charmed Baladas. This time, asking him those 3 questions, I actually got fairly complex answers. I'm not going to pretend like I understood all of what he said either, as he held nothing back. To my knowledge though, on the subject of the disappearances, Demnevanni says that the dwarves were unsatisfied knowing they weren't considered equals with the divines. They threw themselves into researching the Elnofi, one of Nirn's earliest inhabitants, and dissected their sacred wailing into the profane. To be honest, I'm iffy on the details for that last part. I don't really know what that means. However, it comes full circle as Baladas believes that the Dwemer were able to, quote, create the sacred from the deaths of the profane. I'd assume this means create life from death of the gods, aka Lorkhan's heart, Akulikon, etc. This is likely the act that angered the gods, and from there, the Aedra, or something, pulled the plug on them. They were practically erased from existence. Not death, not teleportation, not invisibility, no, something else entirely. Anyway, that's just Baladas's theory, and theories on the Dwemer are a dime a dozen. As for the next question, regarding the artifacts, Baladas makes mention of the Animunculi Guardians, likely referring to the Centurions and the other Dwemer automatons. How they're powered and how they operate are still a mystery to the remaining civilized races. No one's quite sure on how to replicate that kind of technology. Then finally, for the Dwemer language, this one is the simplest. No one knows how to speak it. No one that's alive and kicking, that is, other than probably Yagrum Bagarn. Either way, most of the modern Dwemer books were translated to Aldmeris and were likely rewritten by some of the other Murin Tamriel. Baladas finishes by saying that the Dwemer's books are still in remarkable condition. There's probably some kind of enchantment on them from the earth bones that keeps them from decaying over time. Certainly a very informative lore session. I'd put Demnevanni's 2 cents on the Dwemer as some of the most intriguing theories out there. Like I said though, these are more or less just theories, and as the old saying goes, everyone's got one. Either way, Baladas's responses to the side, I returned to Ryan and Sadrith Mora and gave him my report. I suppose it's not a long report though, as all I had to tell him was yes, he answered the questions. However, Malum says that Gothren will be pleased to know that Baladas is alive and well, so maybe his motives were actually wholesome. We'll see if anything comes of it. Either way, as a reward, the mouth gives me 3 messenger scrolls. These can summon a scamp for 60 seconds. With that, thus ends the quest, 3 questions for Baladas Demnevanni. Returning to Malum, his next quest stays on theme. When asked about chores, he tells me that Gothren wants someone sent out to the Dwemer ruin of Nchuleft. The Archmagister wants plans and or blueprints that can be found within. It's not much to go off of, but fortunately, there isn't much to Nchuleft. It's a relatively small dungeon, and as you'll soon come to see, it doesn't take a village to find the parchment. According to Ryan, Nchuleft is located somewhere west of Voss, right before the terrain crosses into the Ashland. By now, you'll have noticed a pattern with these quests. Every mouth has 2 quests for the Neverine. The first is relatively simple, often surrounding some kind of fetch or message. However, the second one gets the player a little more involved. A duel, a cheeky kill, or a dungeon crawl. There's certainly a flow to all of the mouth quests, and like I mentioned earlier in the video, the Telvanni questline really does do things a little differently. Although, without trying to spoil anything, the predictable 2 quests per mouth does get switched up after this one, so enjoy it while it lasts. Arriving at Nchuleft, the exterior holds 1 Golden Saint, which to be honest, might be a pretty difficult opponent for lower to mid-level players. Remember, it is always an option to run away from them. After all, there's no shame in hightailing when the going gets tough. Within the dungeon itself, I ended up facing off against Dwemer Centurions, both Sphere and Steam. These can also be somewhat challenging foes, especially if you're a newer player and or a magic user. Obviously, this is Elder Scrolls 101, but it does go without saying, it's best to have a lot of potions and regen on you. Potions win fights. As for the plans themselves, you only have to battle through 2 Sphere Centurions if you choose the correct pathway. By veering down the southern corridor, I got brought into a medium-sized chamber. On one of the shelves there, I found Dwemer Scarab schematics. This, more or less, shows a thing or two about the Centurion's mechanics, not that we're able to read it though. This is all I need from the dungeon, and from here, the rest of Nchuleft is a freebie. There are books, artifacts, dwarven specters, which are still one of the most fascinating enemies to me, and weapons that are for the taking. Certainly not bad for lining the pockets or for acquiring new gear. When ready, I recalled to the council house and handed the plans over to Ryan. The mouth said that Gothren was pleased, and as a reward, I was gifted the Archmagister's cephalopod helm. On the subject of more chores, Malum said that that was it for him. So, from here it's on to the next one. According to the UESP, Gothren's helm can be very useful for lower level players. When used, it conjures a bound helm for 120 seconds and summons a Jamora for the same duration of time. Certainly a great defensive piece. With that, thus ends the quest, Mission to Nchuleft. Now, in the council house of Sadrith Mora, there's just one mouth left who has quests for the Neverine. Gallos Methendis is the speaker for Master Arian of Tel Voss. Asking him for chores, his first one is a courier quest. Master Arian wants an encrypted message delivered to Devaith Fur. Once handed over, I'm to get a response from Devaith and then return it to Methendis. Fur is a long-standing member of House Telvanni and plays a huge role in Morrowind's main quest. The only catch though, in classic Telvanni fashion, he prefers to remove himself from all politics, current events, and turmoil that's present within these lands. Devaith lives in his personal tower of Tel Fur, which is on an island southwest of Sadrith Mora. In order to help the player get there, Gallos hands me 4 potions of water walking, 4 quality potions of swift swim, and 7 quality restore health potions. I don't know what kind of enemies Gallos thinks are between here and Tel Fur, but you'd think you're taking on all of the 6th house. Really, if you effectively utilize water walking, you should face little to no enemies on your way to Tel Fur. Swimming though is where you might find problems. There are a bunch of dreg and slaughterfish in the sea. They don't pack a punch, but they can be a nuisance and really slow you down. If you were curious, the message is written in Daedric and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, the UESP did a great job at translating the text to this. Then somehow, there's probably some secret formula to it. They managed to decode it into this. Again, I have no clue how they did it, but taking their word for it, it reads, "To the esteemed Devaith Fur, I will be blunt. I need an ally. The traditionalists and crazies have joined together against me. If something is not done, their short-sightedness may bring House Telvanni to more direct conflict with Redoran, Indoril, Halalu, and even the Empire. Surely you can predict the Empire's collapse as well as I. We should work together to save our house. You could claim a position on the council by merely asking. Even Gothrin and Naloth must admit that you are older and wiser and in every way superior to them in the arcane arts. Your honored student, Master Arian." For now, I'll leave the message at that, but it's certainly an interesting thing to think about. Arriving at Tel Fur, it looks and navigates like any of the other Telvanni towers. Once inside, it can be difficult for you to find your way around. However, by going from the Onyx Hall to the Hall of Fur, finding the opening in the ceiling and levitating up, you'll land at Fur in no time. The Vaith is decked out in some wicked-looking Daedric armor. Given his history and accomplishments, I'd say he more than deserves them too. He's one of the few NPCs in the game that has an entire set, minus the helmet. Speaking with him, he opens up by saying that he doesn't really want to talk with me. It's not my fault per se, but apparently I'm just boring. If only he knew the half of it. Either way, I can throw my boringness back at him and hand Fur the message. He asks for a moment to read it over and then scribbles out a reply. Handing me the message back, Devaith says that he must decline Master Arian's thoughtful proposal. I guess no new alliance for House Telvanni. If you were curious, again the original text is in Daedric, UESP translates it into a word search, and then they managed to get this response. To my former student, regrettably I must decline your offer. I know what you are planning and I wish you well. I have the utmost respect for you personally, but I do not wish to involve myself in the dealings of the council. I feel you will find someone more suitable to your purpose soon. Until then, perhaps you could persuade Baladas. Devaith Fur. Certainly a scandalous note exchange. I'm sure this will come back later in the story, so for now, I'll just put a bookmark in it. Returning to Gallos and delivering the response, he pays me out 500 drakes as my reward. With that, thus ends the quest. Coded message. Returning to Methendis, his next chore for me is also pretty light. Apparently, Andil, the Telvanni apothecary in Telvos, is running low on cure blight potions. So, Gallos would like for me to acquire 3 elixirs and deliver them to Andil. Just for a little bit of added sand to the eyes, Andil doesn't accept homemade brews, and the potions are expected to come out of my pocket. Just lovely. Exiting the central hall, I asked a fellow guildmate for leads on the potions. The lean Arbel said that someone named Purelet Rosterard carries them. The Breton is located at Wolverine Hall, and if you're in her good graces, she might even give you the potions on the house. Otherwise, Sadrith Mora's apothecary, Anna Siloth, and the local vendor, Arngare, have a few bottles for sale. Of course, you can acquire these elixirs through other means if available to you. Rewards, theft, looting, etc. However, if speed's the game, then a quick 100 septum dump into the potions should be the name. Now, as for the delivery portion, this part was way more interesting to me. I've always had a tricky time navigating through Telvos. Not to mention, I always get confused between Voss and Telvos, which are technically 2 separate settlements. Telvos looks like a Telvanni tower was built on top of an imperial fort. To me, it's one of the most underrated designs of the game, a blend of 2 cultures that likely holds a deep and dark history. This tower has doors leading all over the place. Some chambers have friendly NPCs, others have dangerous Daedra roaming their halls. As for Andil, he's located in the Northwest Services Tower. Levitating up to the entrance is the easiest and most direct path. Chatting with Andil, I handed the Cure Blight potions over, and he expressed his gratitude. He then said that he had a few potions to spare, so in return, the apothecary gifted me with 3 quality potions of Restore Health and 3 quality potions of Restore Fatigue. I certainly will complain, and it more than makes up for the 100 drakes I had to cough up. Recalling to the council house, I reported back to Gallos, and he seemed pleased with my efforts. Andil had already informed him of my success, somehow in those 5 seconds of downtime. As an extra reward, Master Arian passed down 500 gold. Now this more than makes up for those added expenses. With that, thus ends the quest, Cure Blight. There are plenty more quests to come from House Telvanni. So far, I've been introduced to the mouths of the leaders and a couple of the counselors themselves. While the Telvanni like to downplay their inner politics, clearly it's more active than what everyone leads on. As we've already seen, there are already secret vies for power and attempts have been made at making secret alliances. Where will it lead, and what does the future have in store for House Telvanni?